Welcome, NASCAR fans, to this week's edition of our On Pit Road NASCAR Race Rewind. I'm Charlie Turner. We're going to be talking about the Sylvania 300 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and I'm joined by my partner in crime, Dan Beaver, down in Texas. How you doing, Dan, today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. What'd you think of that race? It was kind of if I had to put a hashtag on that race, I'd put it like chaos or carnage or something like that, I think.
I think I've used the term chaos a couple of times this week to to describe it myself.
Yeah.
It was kind of amazing. The drivers the chase drivers just didn't seem to want to hang in there.
No, that was the part that amazed me. Is those were the guys that were screwing up, or it wasn't necessarily their fault, I guess, but those teams you would think would be the ones that would be the least likely to have problems, and that wasn't the case Sunday for sure.
I think the count was 8 of the 16 chase drivers had some sort of trouble. And depending on when they had the trouble is exactly how much of an impact it's going to have on their ability to move on. But we've now got 9, I think, of the 16 drivers that are within 18 points of one another, right at the cutoff point. So of those, anybody could move up, anybody could get out, could fall out. The other drivers that are above that mark could, with the right set of circumstances, not advance, Jeff Gordon being one of those. So it's going to keep us guessing right into the end of the Dover race. And
yeah, it's gonna make this coming race real interesting to watch, and we'll talk about that again on the On Pit Row hangout and in our fantasy racing hangout later in the week. But let's talk a little bit more. Let me go down the top 10. Excuse me. I want to apologize in advance to people that may not hit the cough button in time. I'm dealing with an upper respiratory thing today that's really kind of getting me. But Joey Logano was the winner. We should have probably mentioned that at the top of the show. He had a strong car. Looked good, I thought, all day long, and it was no surprise he won it. Here we go. Kyle Larson second, Kevin Harvick third, Jamie Murray another top 10 in the chase in fourth, Jimmy Johnson fifth, relentless Jimmy Johnson. Eric Almirola, nice comeback after the race at Chicagoland in sixth place. Brad Keselowski seventh with a wrecked car. Kyle Busch in eighth with an even more wrecked car. Dale Earnhardt Jr. another ninth place with a torn up car. Brian Vickers 10th, who probably deserved better than he had. What'd you think of that? I mean, looking at that top 10, what's that tell you? I mean, what are your comments?
The Penske guys are going to be the team. Penske's going to be the team to beat.
Yeah, they are. They've set themselves apart.
Yeah, and in this case, Keselowski gambled even and still managed to get up there and challenge for the win.
Right.
Ultimately finished 7th, but he had a top 5 finish going. He got those restarts, so many of them, just a matter of time before one of those dominant drivers kind of got shuffled out. In this case, It happened to Keselowski. I think Harvick was another very notable contender. He had the best driver rating by NASCAR. He led the most laps. Looked like he should have dominated.
Yeah, he led about the first. I think he led the first 40% of that race. I don't know if he ever came out of the lead for first 130 laps or so.
Yeah, there's some sizable chunks there. I could look up the exact numbers, but ultimately, I think the most important thing is that his crew didn't make any mistakes, and that is what's going to be necessary for him to keep running the way he did. Logano had the kind of race. Logano and Keselowski had the kind of race that they had back in July. They could have easily finished 1-2. Kyle Larson, we talked about him being a potential winner last week. He was a potential winner, almost won, or came close. This is the first time in his career he's had back-to-back top 5 finishes, too, which I think is notable. Dover's not nearly, looking forward a little bit, I know we're not supposed to, but Dover's not nearly as kind to first-time winners, but it seems more and more likely that Larson's going to get that win before the end of the year.
Yeah, and
Uh,
this would be a really a more interesting conversation had he made the chase, because he's been maybe the best car other than Logano in the chase.
yeah, well, both of the Ganassi guys. You got McMurray
Yeah,
in the
right, yeah,
five as well.
exactly.
And I don't know that we'd be talking, well, we'd be talking about them, but I don't know that that would impact. I don't think either one of them has the kind of consistency all year that it would take to get into the chase. But then talking about consistency, we expected more out of Matt Kenseth. He dodged a bunch of bullets, and I'm not entirely sure what happened to him at the end of the race. He just kind of fell back. Might
Yeah.
have had the wrong pit strategy. Might have been that things finally got the best of him. So we lost Kenseth from the top 10, and that put him back down into that danger zone of that 18 point separating position. Uh, I
I
mean,
don't have that, so hopefully you do.
yeah, it's in here. Position 8 through 16. So he's in 8th. He's probably the safest of them. But if he drops the 10 points or so, and then these other guys come up, he could get bumped. But which we don't expect in this round. I expected him to get through based on consistency. And if he has another 20 something finish, though, could do him in.
Yeah, we don't at this point. We don't know. I haven't looked at it to where I wanted to like handicap. Excuse me, my top 12, but I'd have a hard time with that right now.
I do a weekly story for Roto World talking about the chase, and yeah, it was incredibly difficult to decide who's going to miss that cutoff, because it's all going to come down to whoever has the problem, and we just don't know. And based on the New Hampshire race, it seems obvious that anyone can. Jeff Gordon cut a tire there at the end while he was about to make a pass for fifth place. Any of these guys can have a problem at any time during the race, and it's just gonna be in question all the way into the end. I
Let's
think one thing we did learn about this, though, is just how volatile the points are. I took notes about this when Denny Hamlin had his problem earlier with the fuel filler problem before he even crashed. He was already dropping back down into being out of chase contention after being up in around seventh, eighth. Not sure where it was exactly last week, but the points are just so volatile in this rubber race, this middle race, and that's going to be even more so in the contender and elimination rounds. Um, and then next week the points are going to be really volatile. So it's a different spin on what we're used to watching.
Yeah, let's talk about. You mentioned Jeff Gordon's tire problem, but he was certainly not alone in tire problems. That was the story to me. The last 100 laps were blown tires, and you think that these teams are gambling? Gosh, I wouldn't think that chase contenders would be gambling with tires, but it sure looks like somebody's pushing the envelope on tires, unless Goodyear just doesn't have the tire.
Gordon's had to have been something odd, because he didn't show any. We didn't hear anything about tire wear throughout the day. It didn't appear that he was doing anything risky. He was on fresh tires. If
Yeah.
anybody should not have blown a tire in the final laps, it was Gordon. He had the freshest rubber of all of them, and I've got to think that just something happened, that he ran over something, or that he was pushing so hard that he just wore out that right front tire. But we didn't hear he was complaining about a pushing condition, which is what we would have expected before that happened. So Kurt Busch's blown tire, yeah, maybe. And then the other blown tires that we saw mostly came as the result of close racing, and they got something pushed in on the tire. Stenhouse's
Yeah, there was a
comes
lot
to
of
mind.
funky looking sheet metal out there.
There was, and all of it seemed to be centered around the chase contenders. Now that's
Yeah,
not
and that's at New Hampshire. We're going to Dover this week.
going to
Give me the
Dover, where
words.
we've had some big one crashes
Yeah.
in recent memory, or yeah, it's going to be odd. The fact that there were so many chasers involved in incidents, I think, also speaks to the fact that there are just so many chasers. You have 16
Right.
drivers out of the field, they're going to get swept into it. but what was it? The Kenseth Kyle Busch, Casey Kane, and Ryan Newman incident. It's like, oh, come on, could you have fixed this better than to have running nose to tail into one another? Wild race, but it's got us talking.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's got us talking. This is the scenario NASCAR wanted, especially at this stage. These 3 races right here are so critical to them because of the start of the football season, and they've got the excitement they were looking for.
Yeah, I think you're right. Any final thoughts? I mean, there was some controversy about the Gibbs drivers not getting along. Whatever.
I think there? That's probably that is the story. Hamlin getting shouted down by his crew chief, and Kyle Busch getting shouted down by his back a few weeks ago at Bristol, I believe. Yeah, things are not happy there, and
now Carl Edwards is coming into the equation. Next year is going to be fun to watch that Gibbs group.
Well, Carl Edwards and Matt Kenseth, we know, get along just like brothers.
Yeah, right.
Like bickering brothers.
Yeah, so, right. Yeah, that'll be fun.
That'll be fun.
Fun to watch. Okay, any final thoughts as we wind up this race rewind for the Sylvania 300 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway?
Well, this isn't the fantasy portion, but I do have to point out that I had 3 drivers in the top 4 and the 7th place driver on my Yahoo team. It was probably the best I've done all year. So. Yeah,
and I picked the winner on pit row last week, just so you know.
Yeah.
Pretty sure I had Joey.
And I jinxed Jeff Gordon like I said I was going to.
You did. That's right. The Beaver jinx. Okay, so the Beaver curse or the Beaver jinx?
Beaver jinx.
Beaver jinx. Okay. You may have to close this out. No, I'll go. Okay, he is Dan Beaver. You can follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Race. Read his fantasy columns at yahoosports.com and, rotoworld.com. And I really apologize, folks. The cough button doesn't work on video. They don't have one of those things that pops up. So we'll let this one go. We'll talk to you next week when we review and recap the big race from Dover. That ought to be a blast to talk about. So he's Dan Beaver. I'm Charlie Turner. We'll talk to you soon.